Before the break, we spoke about the politics surrounding President Trump saying that he would accept information about his opponents from foreign sources. Now we're going to look at the legal implications. Plus, as usual, we have new developments over the Mueller report and some key players. For all of that, we turn to former federal prosecutor Andrew Cherkasky. Andrew, is getting opposition research from a foreign government illegal despite what the president says? And if so, what's the violation? What laws are breaking?
It's not directly a violation of the law to receive information. It's when someone conspires or colludes in a specific illegal manner to get information, especially if that information was received illegally. So the president isn't totally off in his legal analysis. I think this comes down to much more of an issue from a moral perspective as to whether it's a good idea for our politicians to be doing what he's doing now, which essentially seems to be encouraging foreign governments to slide to him whatever information they have.
Does that hold just for candidates running for president or running for office, or does the metric change in 2020 because Donald Trump will be the actual president while on the ballot?
No, that metric doesn't particularly change. It's not a matter of a politician who's in office or not in office receiving the information. It's very difficult to hold someone legally responsible for receiving information. The idea of just getting a letter in the mail or getting an email or even having someone speak to you in giving that information, that's very difficult to outlaw really in any regard, and it's not illegal. It's when you are soliciting it. It's when you're asking a foreign government to give it to you, or if you're encouraging others to engage in illegal conduct to gather that information before getting it to you.
I've heard some people argue that it's a campaign finance violation because you're getting something of value that's not reported. Any validity to that?
There's long been a legal battle about the idea of what is and what isn't campaign finance contributions, especially when it's an intangible product. So the idea being that if it's a matter of research and it's given over to the campaign, is that somehow a contribution? It's difficult to put a value on that. And I think in the course of putting a value on it, you're essentially talking about almost an extortion where you're getting money to get bad information about another person. So I find that to be a difficult legal case to make. It's not illegitimate, and I think that in some cases where you can attach a real value to it, you do run the risk of a campaign finance violation.
And then there's the actual impact beyond whether it's legal or not. We know from the Mueller report that Russia did a lot to aid the Trump campaign in 2016. We also know that while the Trump campaign wasn't conspiring or colluding with the Russians, but they knew and they acted on that knowledge. Remind our viewers of the context that the Mueller report provides in terms of what Russia did for Trump in 2016.
Well, part one of the report really is the details of what goes on between Russia and President Trump and the campaign. And it lays out something that President Trump has talked a lot about, the fact that there was no collusion, as he puts it. It means really that there was no illegal conspiracy. The difference is that the Mueller report absolutely does confirm that Russia did help in many different ways the Trump campaign and Trump ultimately get into office. It may not have been an illegal conspiracy to do so, but Trump and his, Trump's campaign knew that they were receiving information from the Russians. They just may not have been illegally conspiring to do so.
Now, speaking of Mueller and his investigation, the House Intel Committee just subpoenaed Michael Flynn and Rick Gates. We haven't heard from them before. They both pleaded guilty. Can they make a privilege claim, or is there any other way the White House can block their testimony?
I don't know that there has been much word in terms of privilege. There is the executive privilege, which essentially applies to presidential communications with members of his staff, and his staff is not just those who are immediately in the White House with him, but there is an idea that presidential communication is privileged. I think what's a much bigger question here is, what are we hoping for in terms of this testimony? The Democrats may be taking one step too far in failing to rely solely on the Mueller report and instead continuing to dig. I think that they should be cautious, because it's not as though I think Robert Mueller missed anything in his report or in his investigation. And the focus probably should be far more on what he found instead of trying to uncover something new again.
So what do you think we could learn from the two of them? And I'll throw Hope Hicks into this as well, who's also now facing a subpoena and has agreed to come in and testify.
I think this goes back to exactly what I was just saying. I find it to be very unlikely that we're going to receive new information that we're not already aware of through the Mueller report or through other sorts of legal action taken by the Mueller investigative team with the prosecutions that they engaged in. So essentially, everything we know is going to be in the report. It's that connection to what was the president doing to try to cover up anything, or what was he doing in terms of encouraging others to involve themselves with a foreign government? Again, I think that's already documented, and I don't think we're going to learn something new.
Andrew, I don't know what to make of this, which is why I'm glad you're here. The Trump-appointed Office of the Special Counsel, which is different from Special Counsel Robert Mueller, just recommended that Kellyanne Conway be fired for violating the Hatch Act, which is a law that bars federal employees from engaging in political activity. Pretty clear she does that all the time. Is there any weight to that recommendation? And given that Kellyanne's role in the White House is purely political, wouldn't anybody who have her job be violating the Hatch Act all the time?
Well, it is amazing that we can have offices such as that be able to produce reports. And at the end of the day, it's the president who has the authority to hire or fire people that are immediately part of his team. There is no legal construct that I'm aware of that would override the president's decision to keep someone as a member of the staff. In terms of the Hatch Act, it is a thin line that every president has walked with their political advisors in the past. The problem is when a political advisor uses the office to try to get out a political message, that's always the line that's the one that's you have to be careful. Putting the White House in the background, using the presidential seal, those are typically things folks try to avoid when they're making a campaign-related statement.
Finally, Andrew, the Trump appeal on his tax returns, that's the suit against his own banks and accountants to try to get them not to turn over his information to Congress. He's appealing it, and his lawyers argued that Congress cannot investigate the president except in impeachment. Only the executive branch, of which Trump is the head, can investigate the president. This is so obviously wrong. I mean, Congress investigated George Washington in 1792, but this also seems like a dangerous argument. Nobody has the standing to investigate me. I'm curious your reaction.
I think that is absolutely an outrageous claim to make. In fact, I think that it was a mistake to put so much faith in the Mueller investigation, which is a branch of the DOJ. That is all the president's men. So the president owns the DOJ, for lack of a better term. He owns the folks that are there in terms of controlling them. He's their boss. How is that the appropriate agency to be investigating the president when it's Congress who has the only real authority? And we know that because the DOJ says they can't prosecute. So it's Congress who has the only authority to impeach. Shouldn't they be able to run an investigation that would lead to the basis of that congressional act, specifically impeachment? It is, and the judge at the district level who confirmed the subpoena said exactly that same thing. It's obvious.
Former federal prosecutor Andrew Cherkasky. Andrew, as always, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
You know, all of the stories I just discussed with Andrew Cherkasky all lead to a critical question, one we don't seem to ask enough. Haven't you had enough yet? Haven't we all had enough of Donald Trump as president? It's bad enough that with all of the things happening around the world and all of the issues of American life just begging for our attention, instead, each day becomes filled with what stupid thing did Trump say now, or who did he insult now, or any of those other distractions. But we have lowered the bar of what we expect from this president in ways that we have never done before. We used to elect presidents as examples, someone to emulate. Now, he didn't break the law, maybe, is good enough for our president. And after 3 years of putting us all through this miserable Russia thing, he gladly announces he would do it all again. It is time for Donald Trump to go. Whether that means impeachment or voting him out, I don't care. It's time for him to go. Haven't we had enough? We've got serious problems in this nation that are more important than the unemployment rate or your tax rate. Few, if any of us, seriously think that our children will have a better life in America than we will. We've hunkered down into our political corners. We've made enemies of our neighbors, and hate and intolerance are spreading. And at the top of that pile is a man who clearly cares more about himself than he cares about us. We should expect more from a president. We need more from a president. Haven't you had enough yet? Haven't we all? We'll take a break. When we come back, hate crimes are on the rise in New York City, even though overall crime is falling. We've got a special report from our Dominic Carter on what's going on right after this.